Oh man, you're the greatest.
If hostilities between the United States and the Soviet and forget Soviet Union, Russia increase, if it turns out that there's going to be some conflict between uh, American troops and Russian troops, which I don't believe will happen, but if it, God forbid, it does, this has a direct impact on all of us. And I think we should remind our political leaders who are the men and women who fight the wars, and whether we fight major wars or whether we fight. We serve as policemen in different parts of the world, which is a questionable policy. For another time, we could discuss that. The men and women who fight these wars, who are on the front lines in those places, in the military, are young men and women from the Black community, from small town, rural America, Latinos, from the inner city and other places. In other words, it's an economic class situation. You don't find the J.B. Pritzkers of the world join in the army or to try to get ahead and maybe get some vocational training and serve their country. JB and people like that who've inherited all that money are not the ones who fight the wars, never have. And so let's be mindful of that as we conduct our foreign policy, and remember, who are the ones who have to actually do the heavy lifting in these sorts of things. Having said that, uh, war is a weapon of politics, and it always historically has been. And wars are fought largely because of political issues between countries, and they involve all kinds of things, including territorial issues, economic issues, old grudges and grievances, even, of course, religious aspects to it as well. But these things are relevant, and even though we're far away now, and it's happening way there in eastern Ukraine and western Russia, it has importance to our country. And before we find ourselves in a conflict that gets away from us, in other words, the big fear is we slide into a war with the Soviet Union, and that would be a disaster. And I don't think there are any Americans who want to see something like that. I should say most Americans don't want to see that. There is a class in Washington, Joe, part of what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. There is a group, and they're bipartisan. They're Republicans and Democrats, who seem to think that that sending American troops to all parts of the world as police officers, as policemen, is our role now, and has been our role, particularly since the fall of the Soviet Union back in 1989. And this is among the big divides and debates in policy, foreign policy, in Washington, and among the experts in foreign affairs, is whether or not we should become more active or stay active in being the global policeman, or whether we should be a little bit more concerned about our own borders and secure our own country. And I think the illustration of that debate is pretty much Trump and that political viewpoint, which is where I'm mostly at. And then the Biden viewpoint, which is a lot more internationalist, a lot more involved globally. I think there's a balance, frankly, between the two, and you got to use common sense again. I bring that up. And when you choose to fight certain battles and whether they're worthwhile and whether they go to America's vital national interests. And so the question then for this topic, and we'll try to keep this tight and short, Joe, so we don't bore our listeners. That's the last thing we want to do. But I think this could be instructive for the men and women who listen to our show, because I think it's, again, it's an extremely important issue, and it could come down to an issue of war and peace, which I don't think it will on the war side. But, these things don't always play out the way the policy leaders expect. And sometimes events take hold and create circumstances where the leaders who think they're controlling and harnessing events have lost control of those events. And suddenly you find yourself in a shooting war. And that's the last thing any of us want in the United States. I should say most of us want. That would be very bad for our country. And while we're sympathetic to the Ukrainian people and to Ukraine's right for sovereignty and independence, getting involved in something like that in that part of the world against a powerful country like Russia is not a part of America's vital interests, not in the post-Cold War world that we live in today.
Oh man, you're the greatest.